Folks, weekly webinar. We're back. Hoping that you're keeping spirits high and staying safe and healthy. Dr. James, Dr. Mike, here to answer your questions. Dr. Mike, how's it going?
Good. How are you, James?
I'm good. And actually, real quick before we start, I'm just going to make a note, and I probably should have talked to you about this ahead of time, but whatever, we'll just deal with it now. So, folks, as some of you might know, I'm moving tomorrow. So that's why we did the webinar a day early this week. And so I'm going to have some limitations on my internet situation coming up. We do have internet at the house, but it's like a whopping 1 megabit per second until they install the fiber optic in July. And the cell phone situation out there is a little dismal, but I did get a range extender. So I'm going to try and work with Dr. Mike, and we'll figure something out. I might be able to do it on my phone. I might be limited for the next week or two in terms of how a weekly webinar goes. So I'm not really sure. I'm just going to play it by ear and work with Dr. Mike on it. So we're going to get this one done today for sure. And then next week, we're going to kind of figure it out as we go, and we'll keep you posted.
Boom.
Boom.
All right. Let's get started.
Yeah.
Okie doke. So, Sega Sangare.
It's been a while.
What up, docs? I'm back just for this week. I just got back from my world trip with Your Highness Augustine Valdez on the infamous dirigible. I can attest that the Ethernet cable goes directly from the dirigible to Augustine's palace.
I need that Ethernet cable. Fly over my house in Montana so I can do this webinar.
Well, it's like it's a nuclear powered dirigible. No, it's an oil powered dirigible that has uranium lining. So it's going to take a while for him to get there.
Oh, that's okay.
He says the cigars are also great, and I have these stupid questions to ask you guys this time. Question number 1: why are there so many nut huggers in the bodybuilding and fitness industry?
It's true. There are a lot.
A lot of nut huggers. I think that there's a lot of nut huggers in every industry which has a social media presence, so it's not unique to fitness. Nut hugging is easy because it comes from our natural drive to when we like people. We really, really tend to like them, and we want to promote them a lot. And also there's the male dominance dynamic where males perceive each other as threatening. And if you detect an alpha male, one of your good strategies can be to nut hug him to make sure that he doesn't think of you as a threat, so that you can maintain an even one-way alliance where
you're seen as on equal footing.
Yeah, on equal footing, or at least you're seen as a non-threat, so he doesn't beat the shit out of you. And that tends to happen a lot. So that's probably where nut hugging occurs from the basis of, like, if you know a really jacked, strong lifter, you're like, he's so cool, like, he's amazing. You're like, yeah, okay, you're just misrepresenting him as a member of your immediate tribe, and your mammalian brain is malfunctioning. You don't actually know how cool he is. And because, you tend to, one really easy way to test the nut hugging is how much nut hugging do people do as they ascend themselves in strength and in importance. And the answer is less and less, right? So it's not like it's not like they like less and less people or fewer and fewer people. It's just their own dominance becomes greater, so they have to nut hug less because they perceive fewer people as threats. Yeah, that's basically why nut hugging happens. There's probably a few other reasons, and it's yeah.
I think Mike gets this a lot worse than I do. One of the other things I see with the nut hugging is because of the social media presence in terms of getting, activity engagements, whatever. So you get a lot of people who are trying to start their own fitness thing or their own business.
Jared talks about that a lot.
Yeah,
and tag you and everything.
Tag you and everything,
right?
Exactly. So I get tagged in countless things every day that have nothing to do with me whatsoever. And it's really just that person, just, they know me or Dr. Mike or whomever, and they're just trying to expand their own social media reach. And every now and again, they'll comment on something, and it's just one of those, like, I don't blame people for doing that. I'm not trying to sound indignant about it, but I think that's part of it too, is it does have a self-serving purpose of expanding your own reach at times.
Yeah. And not always. Some people nut hug with no self-serving interest whatsoever. Mm-hmm. It just feels right. I think there's nothing super wrong with nut hugging as long as you remain skeptical about what a person is as a human being and what he says as a fitness professional. Like I nut hug, Menno Henselmans all the time, but I actually think he's a good person, and I've met him. And in addition to that, I think he's right a lot. And when I think he's wrong, I'm very clear about it. And we've actually had multiple debates to the death about very minute points when I think he's wrong. The nut hugging gets bad when, someone turns out to be a piece of shit as far as a human being, well, it's difficult to judge all of a person as a piece of shit. Someone does some shitty things and you're like shocked. Like, I can't believe this professional athlete beat his wife. Like, really? A man who gets paid to exert violence his entire life beat somebody else? And like, what's surprise, right? And then people are like have this moral conundrum where they looked up to this individual morally. Like, how the fuck would you ever look up to someone morally anyway, unless it was a moral philosopher or someone like that, or like your dad? I don't know. Like, you don't even know this person. And then another thing is when someone is incorrect about something, it's good to put the nut hugging aside and say, well, I'm a really big fan of Eric Helms. I don't think he's completely correct on this point, though he may be, and I highly respect his opinion, as opposed to being like, if Eric said it, it's true. And the worst to me is when people nut hug me. I'm like, I'm the last guy you want to nut hug. My nuts are disgusting. But it's weird, it's strange too, because like Dr. Mike says, like, what the fuck is Dr. Mike? These ideas come out from my head. James is, you usually want to hear him first. James and Jared, and they usually come out like, a bunch of garbage, and they're like, I think you need to think this through a little bit more. And I'm like, okay. And I write them down, clarify them, and like, okay, now that's better. They have very little respect for my intellectual produce because they get to see it. It's like James works in the Mike Israetel Idea hot dog factory. So he's like, you don't want to see that shit. There's nothing to respect in there.
That's a funny way of phrasing it.
Right. But like at the end of the day, no one is deserving of nut hugging that gives them complete swath to say whatever they want. And you're like, what's his name said it? It's right for me. And just be like, I think this person's super valuable and potentially super cool. And to be a scientist about it in the literal sense of like, the summation of the evidence on net balance seems to lead me to conclude that this person's somebody I should take opinion very seriously. And as they make more and more ridiculous statements that are wrong, you just you grade them down. Like Lyle McDonald used to be somebody that he said stuff, people are like, wow, it's probably right. And nowadays he's like in that like batting 5 out of 10 where he's like half of it is right and very insightful and half of it's completely insane. So, that doesn't mean Lyle's a piece of shit. He also is unrelated, but it doesn't mean he's worthless. It means that whenever you see his work, you're like, oh, that's interesting, but I know he's kind of crazy. He might be wrong about this versus someone like, Eric Helms, you're like, oh, he's almost certainly correct, but he could be wrong. So let me look. Versus someone like, I don't know, the first example I got is like Saddam Hussein posting about fitness. You're like, what the fuck would you care about what he says about fitness? Probably wrong. So Kim Jong-un about fitness. Like, that's really wrong because he's good God. He's out of shape.
Dr. Mike's had it out for Eric the last couple webinars. I don't know if you guys noticed. He keeps name dropping Eric Helms in there.
I hate that guy. This is a known thing.
Oh, all right. That was good.
All right. So next question. Will you guys live to see the end of the training to failure debate, as it's been going on for at least 30 plus years? Well, that's a good question.
It's going to be us versus reps and reserve guy.
That's right. I feel like guys like German or something. Some of his shit isn't German. I think he's a guy just doesn't like Jan Fries at the end of the day.
I know. He comes
probably jealous that Jan has a bunch of clients and, Jan could be more jacked. So he's like, oh, this guy's small, but people listen to him. It's like, yeah, but you're an incel with no actual name. So how the fuck are people supposed to listen to you? Nobody's going to buy a program from 4RIR.
I don't, I don't agree with everything he posts, but I admit it's hilarious. My favorites are the ones that are, he does like a series of like memes where it's like deload after a maintenance phase and like somebody be like jerking off like, oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
That is funny.
Yeah, it's just like 4 hour training, then maintenance, then deload again, then maintenance.
Active rest.
Yeah. So in any case, I think that guy probably likes to go to train a failure. But so Jared and I had a long conversation about this a little while ago. There's two groups of people, I think, two big groups of people in the debate. As far as I see it, and there may be another group which is a little bit more silent. Menno Henselman seems to think this third group exists. So Menno's third group, which he's not a part of, just his observation, is people who overthinkers, overanalyzers, and are actually straight up fucking pussies and don't want to train hard.
That group exists. That group 100% exists.
There you go. So that's group one, or group three rather. We'll just call it group one. And they would prefer that failure training wasn't an optimality because then they would just have to not do it. They also are pro low volume and pro low everything. And sometimes depending on how lazy they are, they're pro low frequency or high frequency, depending on if they want to train a bunch of chest or spread chest out, who knows. But these people a lot of times are also program hoppers. They'll be like, what do you think of Jeff Nippard's 5-day split? And I'll be like, what do you think about it? They're like, I think it's great. Like, why? Because I don't have to train legs all in one workout. Like,
because he wrote it down and I didn't have to think about it.
Yeah, that's the worst reason ever. You should be interested in it because it's very effective, which it is, and very elegant, which it is, but like they're like just trying to get away from working hard. Apparently, that's group one. Group two is a group myself and James and most evidence-based people belong to. Is a group that is looks at the evidence and looks at our own training experience and tries to come up with a sort of integrated approach to thinking about failure in relative terms. Does failure's upsides so that it's probably the best way to train for hypertrophy. If aliens had a gun to your head, you're like, trigger as much hypertrophy right now in this session as your body's capable. None of us would go RIR anything. We would go to failure. I would almost certainly have a training partner alien go beyond failure, like force reps and everything. But an example of an upside. The downside example is the fatigue that session causes is massive. And since you're ever trained once, the aliens don't actually put a gun to your head to grow as much muscle as you can once. You have to train every week, multiple times a week, usually over the course of months, and that's how you grow. The outlandish fatigue accumulation, the stimulus to fatigue ratio being low, is a problem with training to failure. So some way to contextualize that's probably a good idea. Trying to find, where from failures were too far, like 3 or 4 RIR, anything below, maybe too far. And then what happens is you go 2, 1, 0 RIR, et cetera, and try and integrate a plan based on that. I think that's the group we belong in, and that group, seems to make some sense. And then there's the last group of people. How do I say this politely? They're not really big fans of thinking. And they like to pat themselves on the back for going to failure because that's the only hard shit they do in their life. And they like to pretend that they train hard by doing 1 or 2 sets to failure per muscle group per workout. And it's mostly an emotional expression thing for them. Like they really need to fucking rage out on something. And some of them are also lazy because if you really want failure training, you have to do multiple sets to failure. And nobody really wants to do that. So these guys just, like listen to a lot of metal or some shit like that and slap themselves on the ass in the locker room and shit. And they're like, yeah, you're fucking pussy if you don't fucking go to failure. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, you wouldn't know failure if it hit you in the face half the time. And second of all, you're not in the gym to prove your manhood. You're in the gym to grow muscle. And there's a recent interview that Jay Cutler was asked by Fouad Abiad how often he trained to failure during his career. He was like, never. It's like, really? He's like, no, I've never gone. I don't train to failure. Never have. And it's like, okay, tell Jay Cutler he's a pussy. You know what I mean? Like, maybe he is. Sure, you're right. So it's one of these things where, like, yeah, like, not avoiding failure because you're a pussy does make you a pussy. But preferring failure because you need to prove your manhood doesn't mean you're training for optimality. And look, if all of these webinars and all of the YouTube content we have on RP was about like how to become a man, like we would say like train to failure, pour bleach on your face, cut your dick off, shit like that.
Giant mustache.
Ironic way to become a man. Prove you're a man by cutting pieces off your dick off because your dick's so big that you don't even need the whole
dick
thing.
To spare.
You know what I'm saying? Shit grows back. Like iguana dick or some shit. But like, it's not. It's about optimizing hypertrophy. And from that perspective, we take a very emotionless approach to it. Like, look, somewhere between 3 and 0 RIR is probably best. And starting a mesocycle close to 3 and inching your way up. And then deloading after going to failure is probably a good idea. So it makes sense. So sorry. So to ask the question of when that debate is going to be concluded, you need the other 2 people to drop off or be converted. And, like the research on it is pretty clear now that, that what we have described in the evidence-based community is almost certainly what's happening. The debate could be over any time. We need a little bit more research on the difference in failure training responses between beginners, intermediates, and advanced, especially beginners and advanced, because it may be training to failure and beyond maybe a little bit better for advanced than other folks who just might have to squeeze that extra bit of toothpaste out of muscle growth, or their fatigue cost could be so high and their growth could just still be linear that it's even worse for them. And they could even go further away from it. There's at least one study that shows that folks that are stronger and in compound movements don't need to go as close to failure to get full motor unit activation. Who the fuck knew? So it could go the other way. We just don't really know, because right now the only real leg to stand on that you have to consider for the go to failure all the time crowd is, well, I'm advanced. That's why I do it. And never mind the fact that all of your nut huggers, tying the 2 in, are not advanced. These motherfuckers have been training for a year, and they're like, yeah, follow what's his name. He goes to failure. I'm going to be a man like him. I'm going to suck his dick one day. It's going to feel great. I'm going to get his failure in my face or whatever. Yeah, shit like that. So, that's the only leg they have to stand on currently is potentially advanced training application. And maybe that's correct and they have a point. And maybe it's not. We don't know. But for almost everyone, somewhere between 3 RIR and 0 RIR is great, with no particular affinity in any one of those. But in a progressive system, there's a lot of good reasoning to go from the 3 RIR area to 0 RIR within a mesocycle.
Yeah, and so the thing is, the debate is largely over. There's definitely some more fine points that are worth investigating, but what we found years ago was absolute loading operates in a spectrum per any given fitness goal, meaning if you want to be stronger, you can get stronger so long as you're using loads in a certain range. And if you want to get more muscular, we have that same idea. If you want to be more endurant or more explosive, like same idea. You have to be using a spectrum of intensities that are appropriate. There are some that are maybe too much, and there are some that are maybe too little. And then it turns out the relative scaling of that is also very much the same. And from what we can tell, like as long as you're between 0 and 5 RIR, you're probably doing a pretty good job. There might be some finer points and some more interesting things to talk about, like training age or more specific cutoff points. But anyone who's not kind of in that discussion it's kind of a waste of time, because there's no point in picking one side or the other. It's definitely a middle ground where we say there's a spectrum of operational intensity ranges, both absolute and relative, and you can have good success within those ranges.
Yeah. What's really funny is that the train to failure discussion actually mirrors the one about volume progression. And the volume progression is one not even close to resolved within the evidence-based community. Just so happens that James and Jared and I think we're correct, and everyone else is some degree close to correct or off. But it's funny because when we first started talking about MRV, we were on the wrong side of the debate, I think, because we were saying like I was saying at least you should train to MRV all the time. I just didn't think it through. I thought that was the conservative position, and it was because a lot of people were saying there's no such thing as MRV, just train as much as you can. So I was like, whoa, let's just train to MRV. And then the other crowd of sort of minimalists, evidence-based minimalists said, minimum effective volume is actually what you want to train to. And that's like saying that's like a debate between going to failure versus going always to 3 or 4 RIR. But it's nonsense, because going through the whole range is probably the best. And that, we've maintained since then that going from MEV to MRV in some capacity over most mesocycles is probably the best idea due to a lot of reasons. And it still has yet to catch on in a lot of evidence-based folks' understandings. And a lot of the reason I think it has to catch on yet is because of dogma. They just haven't been conceiving of things that way and doing things that way. So we'll see how that progresses as well.
Yeah, and this applies to hypertrophy to a lesser degree, but one of the things that I was working on in the sports book that I've been trying to work on is when you're looking at like MRV versus like just training to an MAV, what you see is kind of a plateauing effect in terms of dose, right? So you keep adding dose and you're going to keep getting more response, but then it kind of plateaus off. And so one of the things that you could say, right, where it's like, okay, you did some amount of training that got you an MAV value, which means it wasn't at like the peak height. It wasn't the best growth or best fitness stimulus that you could have gotten, but it was pretty damn good. The difference between that and the amount of effort it takes to get to the MRV might be massive in some cases. And this is probably more of a sporting issue rather than a hypertrophy issue. But if you're working on something to actually get to like the peak magnitude of gain, like the MRV, it might cost you an incredible amount more effort than taking a slightly less rigorous approach and just going to MAV and then freeing up a whole bunch of training resources to do something else, right? And so in this case, you might think like, I want to train my quads to MRV. You might actually just train your quads close to MRV so that you don't systemically overreach all the time, depending on what you're doing, right? So you can make those kind of cases. I still think, and like Mike already said, if you want to be as jacked as possible, you want to go from MEV to MRV, but there's definitely some wiggle room for discussion within some of those points.
All right, next up is Harry Small. He says, hey, Docs, your smallest, hairiest fan here. My first question is, how would you structure a mesocycle for someone who is 2 foot tall and pure hair? JK, I have a few questions regarding the resensitization phase after a cut before a mass.
Okay.
Number 1, should the intensity through the meso stay the same as any other meso in terms of working from 3, 4 RR to 1 RR by the end? We better stay clear of failure and end the meso to ensure fatigue is fully cleared up going into the first mesocycle of my mass. So actually, we don't actually advocate that you necessarily resensitize after a cut before a mass, but we'll answer. So just to be clear, there's other ways of doing this. You can do a little mass first and then a resensitization and then another mass, but let's just sort of answer this example. No, you can still go close to failure. You just have to modulate your volume. Remember that volume is a much bigger contributor to fatigue than intensity. Or loading for that matter, and that means how much weight you're using and how close to failure you're getting. When people say going to failure is hard, if you do 1 set to failure per week per muscle group, you can do that in your sleep, and you'll drop a shitload of fatigue the entire time. So if you keep your volume as low as it's supposed to be, then going from 3 or 4 RR to 1 RR is totally fine. Mm-hmm. Is that if you want a more nuanced discussion, Is 1 RIR probably a little bit better than going to 0 RIR in a resensitization meso? Probably. You're going to want to leave everything you can with blood, sweat, and tears on the platform. But you can train pretty fucking hard. You just have to keep the number of sets low. That's the real kicker. If you train 3 RIR the entire time, but your number of sets is high, you're going to do a whole lot of not great things on the net balance.
Yeah, and so
James?
I mean, it's essentially what you're making a volume intensity trade-off there, right? So by increasing the intensity, you're actually reducing the amount of volume you need to get the actual stimulus that you want in some cases. So it's probably a good idea to keep the volumes low and progress in the intensity so that you actually can maintain those low volumes before you go into the mass phase. Otherwise, you start getting, of course, things like adaptive resistance and whatnot. So there's always an intersectionality between the volume, intensity, and frequency. And when the intensity goes up, generally the volume needed per any given goal will go down.
Number 2, would you specifically avoid highly fatiguing movements such as deadlifts in the resensitization phase more so than you would in a massing or cutting meso? I asked this because I wanted to use resensitization phase as a mesocycle to bring back in big lifts such as deadlifts. I'll be undergoing resensitization phases as gyms are opening back up. I would like to prime my body for these lifts for a long period of time without doing them before going into my mass. So actually, I've recently on YouTube and in the upcoming book cleared up this issue. I think resensitization phases for a beginner, so beginners don't really need them. Resensitization phases for intermediates are a good time to also increase strength and a good time to increase the intramuscular coordination that is lower rep strength that will make you even better at the lifts for higher reps, more technically proficient, and get more out of them. When you're more advanced, resensitization phases start to look more and more and more like active rest phases because you're so beat up that you can't go heavy if you're going to recover, because a lot of it is joint and connective tissue disruption that is just not conducive to continuing to deadlift or even reintroducing deadlifts. So if you feel that you're an intermediate, more or less, your joints never really bother you, and you love doing deadlifts and squats, and you can keep the volume low and still get a lot out of them, and you're not like, dude, if I keep deadlifting, my back's going to fall apart, then absolutely is a great time to do things like that. But if you finish a huge cut and you're like, dude, what I need to do is just not be in the gym for 2 weeks, then it's time to do more of an active rest style. And in between those two is a resensitization phase that can be 3 or 4 weeks long, but really avoids the lifts that really irritate your axial fatigue and your joint and connective tissue fatigue. So maybe then that's a time to get away from squatting and deadlifting and just use like easier lifts to really, really like let your body heal.
Yeah, so I like the way that you came at this question in terms of like introducing the deadlift during your lighter training so that when you get to the harder training, you're already kind of prepped and you got some momentum going on there. So you can kind of go about it that way, and that would be a good way of like kind of potentiating your deadlift for hard training. Though at the same time, since you're going into the mass, what you can do is keep the exercise variations that you had been doing the same during your resensitization phase. And then when you actually do your mass swap exercises, if you're doing that, you benefit from a super, super low MEV, and then you get to ride out the easy gains for a really long time. So if you, I think it's kind of a wash. So I would say like if you introduce deadlifts early, you gain momentum and you lose some of that easy training, but it's probably like equivalent, long-term equivalent value. So you could go about it 2 different ways. Like if you want to have a really great block of deadlifting, you can introduce it early. If you want to really ride out some easy gains in the beginning of your mass, which is that makes it making it sound like it's a negative thing. It's perfectly okay to ride those easy gains in mass. I would conserve the variation for when you switch over, and then you have time to build up. And both options are okay in my opinion. It just depends on which way you want to go.
Yeah. Good shit. Last one. Is 1 mesocycle enough for this resensitization phase? Possibly a longer meso, approximately 6 weeks. I mean, I think like 3 to 4 weeks is more than enough for most resensitization phases. James?
I think it's plenty. I think both Mike and my opinions have changed on this over the last couple of years. I think from a diet perspective, it's worth taking time in some of these maintenance phases. But from a pure training perspective, and especially this situation where you're just going from cut to mass, this is one where I think you don't need to diet resensitize. You don't need to diet resensitize. You just need to training resensitize, which is really kind of like a 2-week thing for most people. So I would be in favor of taking a 2 weeks active rest and then just getting right to it. If it was like a post mass maintenance phase or something, there might be some incentive to hold out that maintenance phase for a little while. But in this case, there's not a huge incentive to do it.
Yeah. All right. Next up is Rafael, and I read ahead. Sodr.
Sodr.
I don't know. He says it's like Dr. Dre, but acute, something you guys don't have in your language. Very hard to explain. If anyone of you speaks a little French, you will know what I'm talking about. Sodr. I don't know. Rafael Sodr. That's my guess.
Brasileiro.
What is it? Okay, so he goes, hello, Muscle Masters of the Fitness Universe. He-Man joke.
He-Man's
I love
the
it
bomb.
that Rafael tells us what the joke is. It's amazing.
So many Brazilians just look like He-Man for no reason.
Yeah. Whoa, Quadmunes, I look like a He-Man.
Do you know
right.
Paulo Costa, UFC fighter?
No, I don't.
He-Man. Like, just legit He-Man.
That's awesome. All right. He goes, is the one and only RP Plus OG addressing some things first in order? Your Brazilian guy impression is very accurate, but is only from one city of Brazil, which is the most rich. Your Brazilian guy is not the generic Brazilian person, but the specific one is a Brazilian person who has the São Paulo capital accent. You guys are nailing it, cadence and style. However, you only talk that way in São Paulo for the most part. Sorry. What?
Oh.
No, you sorry. São Paulo is Brazil. Everything else, no can have it.
Rafael, I want you to talk to us about the capybara situation next time. I want to know more about these capybaras.
What is the capybaras? Like, if we were in the Central Intelligence Agency and we need you to give us a briefing about the capybara situation in Brazil, that's your next job.
Why are they friends with everyone? They're friends with alligators. They're friends with everything.
Yeah.
Or whatever. It's whatever. Alligator, crocodile. I don't know which one's over there, but
Cayman. All right. Now, the promotion vulture is asking.
I thought you were going to say, now we do jiu-jitsu.
Now we do jiu-jitsu. As I said, I do not get sore, and my wear and tear is almost the same. I have been doing one exercise per muscle. I used to do all of them, but the Russian sapiens taught me better. I went to the other extreme. I have been doing one exercise per muscle. Wear and tear is not something that I feel. Now, okay, just quick before we get to the rest of it, because you don't feel it now doesn't mean you might not feel it later, so be on the lookout. Okay, a lot of times things can go well in the short term, and then they start feeling wacky in the longer term, and then because you've been doing something in the short term for long enough, you kind of like, oh, well, it can't be this. I've been doing it for years, and maybe that's what's fucking you up. Like, in the first 2 mesocycles, Smith squats don't hurt my knees, but after 3, they start to really hurt my knees, and after 4, I can't do them anymore. So it's something I had to deal with, and that's why I take breaks from them. So something in the first meso, I'd be like, oh my God, these are great. I could do these forever. That's just not true. So something I feel normally, make 8-week progression, deload, go to another exercise, but what is optimal? The exercises are handpicked. They are the best, most gains, most pump, mind muscle, SFR, but what is optimal? 10 sets of something like dips, if you can get to it, or 5 dips, 5 of something else that is not that great, or compound that 4 exercises that are good and mashing together. Let's suppose I'm Superman and don't feel a thing, not leprosy. What is the optimal for muscle growth, if you guys can illustrate? What, in your opinion, is the best thing for you guys? Having in mind the high capability of volume and not much structural damage, 1 exercise, 2 exercises. Pick the 4 better exercises and compound 2 by 2, and other month change to 2. Please don't hold yourself. Drop that knowledge. Well, so here's the deal. I've actually just recorded a video that'll be out in the next few months, literally answering this question of how many exercises should I do. If the entire video is about it, it's like 30 minutes long, and I don't want to rant too much about it now because it wouldn't do the video justice, but just a quick preview. You have to look at it from Q James Hoffman needs analysis perspective, and something else is just an analysis of constraints. So what you need is to stimulate hypertrophy. What constrains you is staleness. And another constraint that you have to keep in mind is variation and rotation, because you don't want to use all your exercises at once, because then you use all of them at once, then they all get stale at once, and you have nothing to do because you just have to stop training and let them resensitize. So there's an inherent bias towards using as few exercises as you need to get the job done. That being said, muscles have multiple different functions. So you need to, like, for example, you can't just do rows for the lats, because the lats work a little bit differently when you're doing, straight arm pull downs, and a little bit differently when you're doing vertical pull downs. The fibers get hit differently. So something like, if you want to train your lats, you probably do at least 2 or 3 different exercises, probably a good idea. Your pecs have at least sort of 3 different functions or ways of getting stimulated. One is big stretch at the bottom. Another is big contraction, peak contraction at the top. Like bench presses don't do both of those, just one. Cable flies don't do both, just one. And then you have another one of incline versus sternal, or clavicular versus sternal pecs. So like someone says, can I get optimal chest hypertrophy from just the bench press? No, because you won't get the best upper pecs. And you say, what about, can I get the optimal chest hypertrophy from inclines? No, because you won't hit the lower or middle pecs, right? So there's some exercise, most muscle groups require at least 2 exercises per week, right, to get done. And then lastly, and there's a much more detail to be had in this discussion, which is going to be up in the video, is the stimulus to fatigue ratio, specifically with a mind-muscle connection, as it relates to intra-workout, intra-session. After how many sets of a given exercise are you really just not exerting yourself as optimally, and your mind-muscle connection kind of sucks? And what we'll say is, like James mentioned, I think last time's webinar, down sets do mitigate that to some extent. So you may only be able to do 5 sets of squats until any more squatting just feels like shit and it's not doing anything. I think you may be able to get to 7 sets of squats feeling pretty good if you do 2 down sets after 5 working sets at the regular weight straight sets. But like fundamentally, James and I, this is coming up in the book that we're writing. Our advice is like, if anything is going to be done for more than 5 to 7 sets, it's probably a 2 exercise job, because we found through almost unanimous feedback among clients that if you let's say only let people do 2 sets on an exercise and switch exercises, for a number of reasons, it's way too much exercise switching. People are just getting grooved after 2 sets. You're like, yes, I want that third. After 4 or 5 sets, people have done about as much quality work on the exercise as they will get done. And every other set just feels like the tension in the muscle is not being perceived anymore. Your ability to really contract the muscle hard goes to shit. It's time to do something new that can, even if the muscle as a whole isn't beat up, that new exercise can make it feel like, wow, it's super, super refreshed. So if you're doing like 15 sets per session, it's probably a 3 exercise job. If you're doing 10 sets per session, it's a 2 exercise job. If you're doing less than 5, it's definitely 1 exercise can do it. When you start a meso, remember we say don't introduce new exercises during a meso. If you start a meso for something like, let's say, chest on Monday, and you're eventually going to get up to like 13 or 14 sets of chest on that Monday, then start with 2 to 3 chest exercises, because you're going to need that many, and just add a couple sets to each one as they go. So your real answer is, SFR is everything, but for most people that SFR drop off occurs after, we can say very generally, 4 to 7 sets of an exercise later. I've met almost no one that can do 10 sets of squats and be like, this is amazing, I'm getting incredible contraction. Usually they're just like, what the fuck am I even doing? But like 5 sets of squats and 5 leg presses, man, that's a great fucking workout. You don't need any more exercises for that. You can do 3 sets of squats, 4 sets of leg presses, and 3 sets of lunges. That's good. You could argue that it's a little bit too much exercise rotation, but it's fine. But if you like take the same 10 sets and you're not doing 5 exercises, like 2 sets per exercise, you're just, the SFR is actually poorer, because at least one of those sets, the first set of each one, is a set of which you don't get the best results because you're still adjusting to the exercise. It's almost like designing a program where you never find your groove. It's like, you guys know, I made this analogy, I think, in the video too, that's coming out. When you have a really tasty meal, like, you want to like dig into it and really appreciate the fuck out of it. If you went to a restaurant where they only gave you 1 spoonful of each food, it would be even difficult to appreciate it. You'd be like, this is like lobster mac and cheese. You're like, oh my God, that's so good. Like, do you like it? You're like, yeah. Like, okay, here's ice cream. You're like, but I wanted more of this. And of course, after a certain amount of lobster mac and cheese, you would prefer to eat something else. There's an optimality there that we think occurs in the 4 to 7 set range. James?
Yeah, I totally agree. And, not all, but a large chunk of this can be explained by training age. The simple fact of the matter is, as you train more, you get adaptive resistance, and you have to keep increasing the amount of volume that you're doing. The funny area where I think that's worth talking about is as you're transitioning kind of from beginner to intermediate, right? So we start to see pretty large doses, increases in dose needed to continue driving gains. But at the same time, the intermediate lifter is either by choice or accidentally capable of increasing their SFRs either through technique modifications or just exercise selection. So you see the need of volume going up, but you see the ability to execute that same volume going up in quality. So you kind of get this like gray zone as an intermediate where it's like you're getting better as a lifter. So it's kind of mitigating the amount of volume that you need, but you're still accruing adaptive resistance. And then once you get to that point where your SFRs are largely in check in terms of individualizing your exercise technique, and you just have a good idea of which exercises work for you, now you start to hit those constraining walls much harder where it's like, okay, well, I can't just do 5 sets anymore. I need to do 10 sets, right? And now I have to think about, okay, within 10 sets, how do I break that down? And as you become an advanced, it's like, okay, well, now I might need 15 sets. Can I even do that in one session? The answer is probably no. I might actually have to do, instead of one session, like maybe 3 sessions of this quad, activity. So the needs analysis includes that idea of training age, and there's a couple big milestones along the ways in terms of how many exercises you need to incorporate in your program, all of which Dr. Mike already explained very well.
Yeah. Almost always the people that are like, you just have to squat and bench for growth are beginner intermediate transitions. They just caught their little sail, their little wind in their sails, and they just learned how good they are at squatting and how much they like it, and they're excellent gains. And they're like, I'm just going to squat for legs. And then when you get to be an advanced intermediate, you're like, that was the stupidest idea I've ever had.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things, like, again, you don't choose based on what Dr. Mike and I said is the optimal number of exercises. You choose based on your own individual constraints. How many sets do you need to get done? How good is the SFR of the movements that you've chosen? And you kind of go from there at that point.
Yeah. Number 2, in case of a drop of performance, I usually use the first 2 sets only as a proxy. Is that wrong? Like if I'm doing in the first week 10 reps, in the last I have to do at least 10 reps or more, but as the RIR gap closes to 0 because of fatigue accumulation, so I'm pushing myself more in the last week as fatigue accumulates. Yeah, that's fine. James and I don't use the first 2 sets, but we use only the first exercise in a group. So if you train chest on Monday, and you're doing incline bench press, and then you're doing cable flies after, we only measure performance on the incline, and we only compare comparable sets. So let's say week 5, you did 6 sets, and week 4, you did 5 sets. Well, we don't care what you did in set number 6 of week 5. We just care what you did in the first 4 sets, so we can interpolate those numbers and say, oh, okay, like you just have less reps between those 5 sets. That means it's a drop in performance, or it's just as many, you're fine, or it's an increase and you're doing better. We also like to average the reps. So for example, in week 4, you could have done 8, then 10, then 6 reps in the first 3 sets. And then in the second week after that, the week after that, week 5, you could have done 12, then 6, then 8. You'd be like, well, which one's better? Because the second set you sort of sucked. The first one was way better. The third was about the same. Well, if you just average the reps, then you really get a good picture of what's going on. Because some sets, and that's the really cool thing, is some sets just go better than others. But look, if you had 4 sets to really show your stuff, and across all 4 sets you sucked more than last time, you suck. It's not like you could have a bad first set and be like, oh man, but I made it up on the second set. Like, well, then you're really at your MRV. You're at your MRV when there's no making it up. When trying to make it up digs you a deeper hole. And then the third set, like you're supposed to hit 10, 10, 10. And then your MRV, you hit 9, and you're like, I got to hit 10 on the stack spun. And you do heaven and earth, wind and fire, and you get 10 on the second set. That third set's going to be like 3. You're going to be like, okay, clearly I'm not getting 30 total reps in the first. So that's how we would do it. First 2 sets is fine, but I think our method's maybe a little bit more integrated. But definitely use the first exercise. Why first exercise? Why not second? Because the first exercise measures your muscles when they're fresh, ready to work out, and really tells you how they're doing. Because you're adding sets to your first exercise anyway, you don't get a good comparison for what you did in cable flies as a second exercise this week versus last week, because there's more sets of inclines leading up to it. Of course you're going to underperform. So first exercises only, and make sure you're comparing only like versus like sets. And the more sets you have to compare, the better. It just has to compare the same number of sets.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important distinction, because if your numbers don't match on the first sets of your first exercise, that is indicative of either local or systemic overreaching, right? So if you were supposed to get 10 and you get 6 on that first one, something's wrong, right?
Something's wrong.
If you get 9, it's like, man, it's kind of there. Maybe maybe not. But if it's like 2/3 to half of what you normally would get, it's very clear that something is wrong, right? Whereas on the latter sets or different exercises, if you did 6 sets of incline bench, like anything downstream of that, if it's pec or tricep related, it's going to take a natural fatigue related hit.
Yeah.
It's hard to measure.
MRV between sessions measures between session recovery, not within. So people think like, well, my reps are dropping off a lot. That doesn't matter. Your reps drop off because you're tired. But we're talking about between sessions. And what James, here's another way to contextualize what James just said. Like if it's 6 and it's supposed to be 10, you're probably fucked. How does that jive with the integrated approach where you count, let's say, all 3 sets of comparison? Well, think of it this way. If you're supposed to do 10, 10, 10, let's just say, and the first set you did 6, that means if you're going to get 10 on your third, which is curious, if you got 6 on your first, how the fuck are you going to do that? But here's what you also need to do. You need to get 14 on your second.
Like,
good luck. That would be like an all-time mega ultra PR that you're just never going to hit it. So that's why the average, that's why when James says, look, if your first set is 6, you're really fucked, you can interpret that to be like, well, I thought you guys were saying averages. One set doesn't say anything. Like, no, it doesn't. But like, if you
we know where this
your
is going.
first quiz in a class of 3 total quizzes, you're not getting an A. and MRV means you need an A every time. So, sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's when like training wisdom takes over training practice. Like if James and I are training together and we're trying to hit, PRs, and someone gets 6 out of 10 in a first set, we look at each other and we're like, "That's time to shut it down, dude." Like,
why don't you have a seat on the couch over there? Why don't you relax for a minute?
Yeah, 8 or 9, yeah, you can make that up, maybe. 6, you're not making up shit. So, all right, number 2, in case of a drop performance, Number 3, in the overreaching phase, can I do the same training 2 times a day? If I can handle, would it be beneficial? I would take a dealer after without any training then. I actually just don't know. James, you want to take a stab at this one?
Is he saying do the same session 2 times a day?
Same session. Let's expand this a little bit intellectually. Let's say same muscle group. So chest AM, chest PM. I don't think from a mechanistic perspective that makes a ton of sense. I would prefer you rested longer and just did more chest sessions that week. And I think if your training frequency is appropriately high anyway, like just have this super high quality Mondo 4 chest workouts that week rather than having like 8 chest workouts, but all of them incrementally suck more and more and then you die.
Yeah, it also begs the question of like, were you actually under training that entire time? Like if you can actually train chest again later that day, I would suspect that you underdid it the first time, right? And so I would agree with Dr. Mike. It might just be worth spending more time taking a longer session and then maybe adding your accessory work to a PM session if training your legs or your chest or whatever, your back just takes so fucking long because you have so many sets to get through, and then doing like your arms or shoulders, whatever later, that's perfectly fine. No one would judge you for that. But if you can, I've experimented with this before, like when we were in the lab, because I was trying to do some of the same shit the weightlifters were doing where they would squat, back squat AM, front squat PM. I tried that, folks. It causes all the wrong pain. Right? Not the good pain. Not that like I fucked my quads up. It's like I just fucked my body up. I don't know why I did that.
Yeah. Tons of joint discomfort. I was not a big fan. I tried that shit. It didn't do me a lot of good. I would rather rest a little bit longer, come back in 2 or 3 days and do another great workout, rather than have a super workout in the AM, a dog shit workout in the PM, and then have to rest twice as long between.
And I can't help but think that I want to choose my words carefully here because I don't know if interfere is the right word, but it definitely would be a disruption in the SRA process for that muscle group because, within 2 to 3 hours, we're already seeing like transcription translation and then protein synthesis starts happening for the next however long it takes based on the muscles and how hard you trained. So I can only imagine that if you train that muscle again, if you can even present an overload stimulus again, and if you can, that seems odd. That just seems like you're going to have this kind of downward dip.
Yeah. James, oh man, this is brilliant. So if you can, it's odd. And if you can't, why the fuck are you training?
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. So I think that basically nails that one. So it would seem suspicious on numerous levels, my friend.
Yeah. All right. He says, like, if I want to increase my upper chest area, I can do like 46 sets of incline Smith machine bench press. I have done it. It was amazing. Great gains. I put another chest on top of this and pair if I can recover is fine too. Yeah. Same question as last time. I wouldn't do that. Number 5, guys, I must be doing something wrong. If it is crazy for you guys reading, imagine for me doing it. I have done a caloric deficit 40 sets a week for triceps, 60 for side laterals. It's probably fiber conversion. Can't be that far, but I grew plenty. And that last part that fucks the puzzle in my mind that I grew a lot. I don't know if anything is real anymore. Matrix joke. At this point, I'm rambling on paper, LOL. Listen, just if something is working, you don't have to look at gift horse in the mouth. There's an American expression for you. Just keep doing it, and you're totally fine. And as you realize that you're doing super high volumes, if your gains start to become less than impressive, then the correct answer is probably reducing your volumes, and try that. And then if your gains become really unimpressive, then I guess you just go increase volume again. But it's totally fair. Look, if it's working, here would be. What's his name? Rafael. He would be a real puzzle for us. If you were doing that much and it wasn't working, then we would have some things to tell you. But if you're doing that much and it's working and you're not having joint connective tissue stress, you don't have a ton of systemic fatigue, buck it up. Some people just do. Menno Henselmans has a client who does regularly 70 sets of back per week. It's a female client, and she's just like, just her back just does not take a shitload of damage, and she gets her best results from ultra high volumes. People are different. Mm-hmm. Genetic variation in individuals is massive. I have no doubt in my mind that there are people on this earth, few, but there are, for whom 1 to 2 sets per week close to failure is their MRV or close. That absolutely exist. And they might be so fast twitch and so big that they actually grow the best like that. That's absolutely possible, all the way up to people for whom anything under 60 sets per week is not even above maintenance volume. That's absolutely possible. Those are incredibly rare people that they do happen. Remember that the tails of distributions are incredibly long. So that does happen. So if you find yourself on one of those tails, it's okay. As long as you're getting good results, you're good to go. If you're not getting good results, then it's time to change. But you're kind of saying, like, I'm doing a lot of training, but what's happening? Like, you're growing, motherfucker. Stop asking what's happening. When you're not growing, then it's time to start asking what's happening.
Yeah, stop whining already. You won. Just quit rubbing it in our faces.
What's
dick.
wrong with you? You're a little bitch. You need to train twice as hard, 50 times as hard. You need to be doing
100 sets of delts.
Sets. Yes.
I think it would be doing. Sorry, I was cut your Arnold impression off. But I was going to say, like, in the other direction, it would be easier to explain, right? And that's admittedly true. So if you were saying, I'm doing like 60 sets of this and that per week, and I'm not seeing any performance gains, Mike and I would look at each other and go, yeah, either your exercise technique is garbage, your SFR is garbage, or you're just training too much at that point, right? Yeah. One or a combination of those things. That would be really easy, very logical. In this case, you're making gains. So just keep doing what you're doing. You won. It'll slow down eventually. This is the thing that you're going to run into, is at some point that will stop. So for now, you can keep doing it until you can't do it anymore.
Yeah, 100%. Rafael is just a fucking comedian. He goes, how to know if I have outlier genetics? Is that a metric? It's not FFMI. I have black eye genetics, obviously. Rafael, I have no idea what the fuck you look like. Hold up. Let's look up what Rafael looks like.
Oh, God.
This has to happen. I do follow him, so it should be a quick... Let's find out how Instagram search algorithm works. Rafael. Rafael. Oh, he does have black eye genetics. Hold up. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, let me unshare mine first. There we go.
Okay. I think this is him. Yes, it's him. Okay. So, boom.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right on.
I mean, clearly you're a black guy, so you must have black eye genetics. Damn, look at them triceps, son.
Oh, fuck.
This motherfucker's talking about some problematus. Hey, ain't no problem here, motherfucker. I don't see any problemas. Shit.
All right, enough of that.
Anyway, all right. So let's go back to the, hold on. Is the screen still shared or no?
I think you unshared it. Yeah.
Okay. So let me go back here. Is that a real thing? How do I know if I'm Black Jared Feather, but the trained wrong for all those years? Time will tell anyway. Ha ha ha. Yeah, look, the thing about genetics is that they don't require your consent. You either have whatever genetics you have. So all you can ever do is do your best. And at the end of the day, listen, Rafael, you might be the next Kai Green, or you might be the next guy who trained and got 20 kilos of muscle and then got 21 10 years later. So you never can tell. Just keep going and doing your best. But yeah, that's okay.
I think the evidence is clear at this point, right? Like, we saw your Instagram.
Yeah, you're jacked already. You're doing everything, and it's making you jacked. Keep getting jacked. He says, thanks, guys. Translate the fucking RP book for us morons. Don't let motherfuckers take it. Own that shit. Haha. By the way, the Denisovanos, okay, so it's the Denisovians. It's a human branch of evolution. Are human/ape-like creatures before Homo sapiens. Basically, I was trying to do another caveman joke unsuccessfully. Ethiopian stripper out.
Jesus.
Amazing.
Today we're doing meal preppy.
Now meal prep. Okay.
Have it the Grammy carbohydrate.
Carbohydrate. Okay, Alejandra Coais. Another Brazilian, I think.
I'm telling you, we're blowing up in Brazil right now. I'm telling you.
We should read her question in Brazilian accent.
She's going to be like, I'm from Arizona, you dickheads.
She's like, you guys are assholes. We're like, but Rafael said. And he comes on, he's like, no, they're right. That's how you sound. She's like, fuck. Hello there, doctors. Hope you can help on this woman topic/issue. I get stress incontinence whenever I do high intensity workouts or lifts. Also when I sneeze. Stress incontinence.
So
peeing. Okay.
Yeah. Like leaking.
I'm not sure how to explain it further, but it bothers me to the point that it either distracts or discourages me from working out. It happens mostly on burpees, mainly on conditioning workouts, but occasionally on strength lifts as well as goblet squats. I've searched online about it, and the consensus is that it's common and just to wear dark pants and pads. And just in case, I'm a 28-year-old woman and haven't been pregnant. What are your opinions? Let me know if more info is needed for me so I can post it on the next Q&A. Man, I know nothing about it. I just know it's completely benign, so it's nothing to worry about. And I know it happens to a ton more people than talk about it, so I wouldn't worry about it much. And if your doctor says you're healthy, pee it up, girl. Pee all you want. That's what I say.
I don't know much about this at all. I've heard some things about it in post-pregnant women, that strengthening the pelvic floor can help with incontinence issues. I'm assuming that's like a totally different issue altogether, but that seems to be a common theme. I would maybe look into that or ask a doctor. I don't even know, OBGYN at that point. That's all I got.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. That's just not our area of expertise.
It does happen though. I mean, like, it's not a weird question. I mean, people do it all the time.
Yeah. It's definitely nothing to worry about. You just speak to your doctor about it. And if anyone else has any insights about how to potentially decrease it, that wouldn't be us.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
I like when people are doing a snatch and they drop a big deuce in their singlet.
That's a bit different, isn't it? Ugh, good God. Still got to stand up with it, man. Clean it up for cleaning jerks.
You got to use the shoe to wipe off the platform real quick. Hope nobody notices.
They're like, sir, you just put shit everywhere on the platform with your shoe. Like, I was trying to help. No, you weren't.
People shit in MMA all the time.
Yeah, it's fucked up, man.
It happens. Oh, well.
Next, a coach mentioned that German volume training is one of the best methods to grow your legs. What are your thoughts on German volume training? Because I've seen that GVT is not recommended, but I want to grow my legs and glutes, so I was thinking of doing squats and hip thrusts with GVT programming. Moreover, should we care and matter as a fitness community when the aforementioned coach claimed to have lifted a heavy weight, but then it was found out to be fake plates?
Okay.
Yes.
Let's deal with that one. We'll deal with that one separately.
Okay. Even if the coach is highly praised, influential, and gives lots of advice, albeit suboptimal in many cases. So German volume training is not a good idea because for most people, it falls somewhere between the top end of maximum adaptive volume to MRV, but it's just not something you want to start with because it's way too much volume at the front end. So you can you would just start with normal sets and reps and slowly add sets as you're able to recover and your strength is stable or increasing until you get to potentially, if your body can recover from it, German volume training volumes, which just 10 sets of 10. Your reps, as we mentioned on RP, should be anywhere in the 5 to 30 rep range. Sets of 10 is a great, average. That's totally fine. How many sets, though, is a matter of starting it close to your minimum effective volume, which is somewhere where you get a little bit sore, you get a little bit of a pump, get a little bit of a perception that you did some work, and then slowly go up from there as your body's able to recover and you recover on time. That's it. So it's kind of like, German volume training may be something that you pass on your way from low volume training all the way up to ultra high volume training. So all of it's good. It's just, it depends on what kind of shape you're in. It's almost like asking is a medium drink a good drink to have? Like, well, it depends on how thirsty you are, right? Like if you're not very thirsty, it's a stupid drink to have because you're going to throw out half of it. So an extra small is great. If you're ultra super mega fucking thirsty, then it's stupid to order because you need an extra large. So you got to tailor it. And all of us sort of need an extra small drink when we start a training mesocycle. So we start with fewer sets and then we get bigger drinks as we go. That's it.
Yeah. So as Dr. Mike already said, the main limitation to GVT is it's not individualized to your needs. It's just a brute force approach, which for some people is great, especially if they're not used to training in high volumes and they've never actually worked up to their MRV. The problem is it's not met for your individual needs. So we have a completely different position stance. And if this is the first time hearing it, welcome. We have a system we call the Volume Landmarks, and there's a number of resources that we have on our website. We have books and stuff, but basically we look at how do we have a good productive beginning of a mesocycle in terms of where do you start in terms of sets and where you end, and how much should I train, the hypertrophy hub, all sorts of things on RP have all sorts of information on that. And that's something that Mike and I have been very vocal about and have talked about endlessly. So check those resources out. And then if you want to come back next time and write us a question about how, GVT compared to training between MEV and MRV, we'd be glad to break that down even further. But the blanket kind of statement is just that it's just not individualized to your needs. It's just here's here's an arbitrary number of a lot of things to do it. So
yeah, exactly. It's like when you have a hammer, every problem's a nail kind of approach.
Exactly.
So
then
James,
there was
did you want to address the fake plates?
Yeah. So I have mixed feelings about this, because a good coach is somebody who doesn't necessarily have to be a high performer. Somebody who should be knowledgeable, should be personable, and can help walk you through everything you need for all of your goals, right? So whether or not they are the best rugby player, the best power lifter, the best bodybuilder, to me, it's largely irrelevant. I do like when people have experience in those things so that they can coach you through all the things that you need to know. They're going to be able to tell you, hey, here's something that comes up that you need to be aware about. If you have a powerlifting coach or a weightlifting coach, they're going to help you run your numbers at the table. It's something that you've probably never done. They're going to help you through your warm-ups, which is something you've never done for competition. There's all sorts of little just minute things that somebody with experience can walk you through, and that's what being a good coach is all about in many ways. However, I think it also is indication of like a history of lying, insincerity, and just a lot of other, when somebody is the fake plates thing, when they're posting videos, it shows that they have like a very weak ego. They're perfectly okay with lying and putting it out there. So there's just a lot of like personal traits there that I don't think are things that I would want to be affiliated with. Now, that's not to say that that person might still not be a good coach, but to me, it would be indicative that they have some issues that they're dealing with, and that their moral compass is not in line with my own. And so maybe we're not going to get along.
100%. Great points.
I've been using the RP diet to fuel my weightlifting performance for years, and RP's simple, science-based approach has been instrumental to my success. With the new RP Diet app, following RP's principles is as easy as entering my goals and schedule and choosing my favorite foods. The app builds a diet to my exact needs, reminds me to eat my meals, and adapts to my body's changes every single day and week. The RP Diet app is a huge help in my quest to become the best athlete I can be, and if your goal is to be your best, it will help you.
Lastly, how can I better gauge reps in reserve, specifically?
So I highlighted this one because I don't want to be dismissive.
Okay,
but
super.
We do beat this one to death, and she does acknowledge it in her post.
Okay, super. Yeah.
We're gonna go.
So our dressing of it was basically like, just do your best guess of when that starts to get hard, the lift, and then just analyze later, because every mesocycle you're going to be getting close to failure, and you can see how far off you were. That's it.
Totally.
As long as you make a decent guess, progression takes care of the rest. Daniel Hacker, a man who spends almost all of his time infiltrating computer systems around the world.
Hackzor.
Can you guys list some of your favorite quad exercises to do on lighter quad session in the week in the context of having a fully stocked weight room? Usually on my lighter quad sessions, the variants I toggle between are high rep leg extensions, walking lunges, walking lunge to squat superset, and lastly, Smith machine front foot elevated split squat. God damn. 10 to 15 reps range. Can you guys give me some other ideas that I can use for future mesos? Thanks. I like leg presses. That's my idea. I like high rep leg presses are great, especially with a rest pause. So you do a set of 15, rest for 3 seconds, set of 6, rest for 3 seconds, set of 5, etc. And you're, oh my God, you get to about 30 total reps in rack. You only need 2 or 3 sets like that per workout. And then you mean, like, that's the equivalent of like 10 approaches to failure. So it's gnarly as fuck, and it's super great. James?
Yeah, so I'm with you on the knee extension. That's always a hit for me. But again, Mike and I, we've talked about this, probably anthropometry-related SFR issue. I really like belt squats. That's one that for me is a home run in terms of light quad day. Like, hard to beat that. And actually hack squats. And for me, it's light because I'm not very strong, but it does reduce quite a bit of the like systemic fatigue of regular squatting. So I've had good luck with hack squats, and it doesn't crush me like doing a barbell squat would for higher reps, like 10 to 15. That's always a good one. And one that I've been doing lately, which is irrelevant about the weight room, but is sissy squats, which fuck your knees up. It's not easy on the knees, but when you kind of are taxing some of your quad variations, I've been using that one lately. And for me, it's great. For other people, like for Dr. Mike, I would imagine it's probably not very good at all. I think it also depends like on how long your tibia and femur are, and how much benefit you get from the movement. Because to really get a lot of benefit of it, you got to fucking limbo. You got to be way back there to get a good stretch and a good like amount of ROM. So that's one that I've been using with success so far, but it is hard on the knees, undoubtedly.
Next question from Daniel. Do you both have exercises that get stale on you much quicker than others? How do you fix it, or do you even fix it? If it's a new variation of a dumbbell lateral raises get old so quick for me, and I have a few hunches as to why I can't progress in weight on them very quickly. I can't add reps on them very quickly, and I can't use much weight on them. It seems meat-headed, but I think this is definitely a thing. Do you think it might be a good idea on them to not train as close to failure and do more sets, or maybe not feel as though I'm pushing them to the limit all the time, but still pound the volume? I usually stop my laterals around 5 sets, but more so because I'm just over it rather than my lateral delts are trashed. Well, so down sets are a really good idea there. I think that's something you could say check out. If I stayed a bit farther away from failure, I'm sure I could push to 7 sets and still stay within the desired rep range. I mean, I think down sets are better because staying far away from failure and doing more sets doesn't actually give you any more advantages, I don't think.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. It just gets demoralizing and frankly aggravating to do the same sets and reps, meso after meso, with the same weight and largely the same reps, and I need to fix it. I just haven't progressed on them in a long time, and it sucks. The last fact means nothing, but current PR is top pause laterals for 13 with the 30s. So I think that you can transition to different styles of them. You can do them slightly leaning over, like Birdo style. You can do them with a pause, and you can do them without a pause, and you can do them superset to upright rows or something, and that gives you like 4 variants right there that you can only have to do the regular non-paused laterals once every 6 months or something like that, and keep your training really fresh. So that's a thing that maybe you want to consider.
There's also like thumbs down. There's cable. There's a ton. Or you can just switch to like upright row variations. The thing with like the lateral raises is it's such a lightweight exercise to begin with, and they're small muscles. There's just not a huge room for improvement unless you're using like 1 pound increment type weights. Yeah. So, I mean, going from even 27.5 to 30, that's a big jump. I mean, even if you're somebody like myself or Mike's size, I mean, Mike does a lot more weight than that, but that's still like a substantial jump even for intermediate male. I think it's just one of those exercises where like, unless you could work in like half pound increments, there's just not a lot of huge room for improvement or increases in intensity week to week. And so you shouldn't feel so down about it.
Yeah. Matthew Van Schellenbeck
gets the name award for this week.
I mean, he's like a royalty.
Who's the actor who played Khan in the Star Wars? Star Trek, excuse me.
Well, Cumberbatch.
Benedict Cumberbatch. His name reminded me of that name.
Yeah. My name.
Matthew Van Schellenbeck.
Khan.
He was great.
Why did he move his mouth and face so much when he talked?
Because he's amazing.
You really need to, I guess, yeah.
Don't you besmirch his acting.
Man. Okay, he says, I love the Q&A with Mike and Menno. Mike, being as you have trained and hung out with Menno, what changes would you make to his program / training if you were coaching him? What changes do you think he would try to make for you?
Stirring the pot.
I've asked that in Q&A, but I missed it. Thank you. Well, I think that you can answer your own question, Matthew, by knowing what it is that we approach training as, and there's probably my training would look more like what I would do for myself and vice versa. Well, I will say that 2 things. One is, to answer your question, I would probably have him do a slightly lower frequency and periodize his frequency, and he would probably have me do slightly higher frequency. It's probably the biggest changes. But fundamentally, I think Menno and I would both agree that we're not qualified to coach each other because our expertise is so high generally, and we know our own bodies so well that it's really, really difficult for us to coach each other, because it's a matter of telling someone something they know better about themselves. Like Jared Feather and I help each other with our programs, but mostly in just general theoretical suggestions and skeptical questions about why are you doing this versus that, rather than writing a program. If I write Jared Feather an exact program, he'd be like, actually don't like this exercise. I prefer to do this after that. And my frequency for chest is better off 2 than 3. And I'm like, oh, okay, I don't even know why I'm doing this. And I don't do it. He writes his own programs and I critique them, or I write him a template program and he critiques it, or vice versa. And when he talks to me about diet, he doesn't say do this. He's like, well, what would you think about increasing your carbs a bit from where they are now to here, or decreasing to there, or doing this with fats? And I go, man, that's a good idea. And then I contextualize it. So the only thing I would ever be able to do for Menno is act as like a consultant, and then him for me as well. So I think that's probably the most pertinent thing.
Yeah, I think people tend to think for some reason that like Menno, RP, 3DMJ, like we have these like vastly different ideologies and training methods. And I mean, the differences are small, guys. We're talking like maybe like a 2% or less type difference, right? And those two things, that small difference, those small differences seem to be like highlighted to such a degree that people tend to blow them out of proportion. Like if you look at anything that I've seen, some of the programs that Menno's done, I've seen some of the stuff that 3DMJ does. It's a lot of the same stuff. It's a lot of rinse and repeat. We largely all do a lot of the same things. When we change frequency, that's a little bit different. When we decide to do fatigue management, sometimes that's a little bit different, but we all do fatigue management. We all change frequency at some point. It's just how we implement it. They're just slightly different strategies. They overlap more than they are different. And I don't know why people seem to think like we just diverge at these huge intersections. We really don't.
Yeah. All right. Harrison Caton. Hi, Dr. Mike and Dr. James. Thanks for your replies from last week. You ripped me a new one deservedly with how I got back into training. The second max snatch day was totally ego, and the max front squat was also ego/boredom. As far as injuries go, I'm not injured, thank God, and everything is feeling normal and healthy. One nice benefit to this break is that low back tightness, which I've asked about in past webinars from a tweak I got a week or two before my last comp, has gone away and healed up. That's really great. Nice. And some wrist discomfort has also gone away. This is that we were talking about like training breaks last time and how good they are. And it's exactly illustrative of that. You mentioned that I should really ease into training. It's my bad that I didn't clarify what I'm doing. I'm back into a workout routine that I'm consistently dieting. The next 4 weeks of training is a bridge block. Its main goal is to reacclimate me slowly into volume training by building up work capacity. In my case, return to fitness. That's great.
Great.
He starts off with a very small amount of sets and a lot of accessories. I don't understand how those two are mutually compatible.
Yeah. I think what he's trying to say is like
a lot of main work sets for compounds and lots of few compound work sets and lots of accessories.
Well, I think it's meant to just say like I'm not doing a ton of the really hard stuff, but I'm doing enough of the easy stuff to kind of build myself up, which I don't totally care or agree, but I get the idea.
Sure. Any competition movements are done with low volume and intensity, more for technique with an emphasis on specific rest time between sets to build up set work capacity, return to fitness. Rest time between sets does not build work capacity. It builds an ability to recover quickly between sets.
Unless you're like completely out of shape, deconditioned, right? And at that point, putting any kind of restriction on rest is cardiovascularly intensive, but we're assuming that you're way beyond that.
Yeah, the bridge block, Harrison, should be just mostly sticking to the competition compounds and doing them very easily and doing more and more of them each week, not smashing a ton of volume on the accessories while building up your compounds. The thing about your compounds specifically that makes them more fatiguing or injurious when you're so unused to other stuff, it's the total amount of volume always makes the biggest difference. So take that for what you will. Let's see. I do have a question. I do have about how I started. I chose the snatch because it's so technique driven for me, aka I suck at it. I also know not to do a maximal force exercise right off the bat, though I definitely know now to give it more than a few days before doing that front squat shenanigan. Last time I hit a snatch PR was August of 2018, so psychologically, as soon as I hit a small PR, it sparked with me the desire to train again. In your experience, when, if ever, is it a good idea for a client or athlete to do something off program for fun to refire them to train? If so, what would you have them do? Yeah, I may be the most wrong person in the world to ask that. I think if you need fire to train, go fuck yourself. But
you know what? This is the exact purpose of what an active rest phase is for.
Yeah, you're not trained to refire for training.
So you if you're coaching them and they are exhibiting symptoms of staleness, plateauing, stuff like that, the active rest phase is the time where you give the autonomy back to the athlete. You say like, you know what? You can just go fuck off for a couple of weeks. Do what you want to do. I'm not going to write your program. You can do as little or as much as you want. All you have to do is not get super fat, not lose muscle, and not decondition, but anything else is up to you. And that's usually the time where this kind of stuff works itself out. That's exactly what it's meant for, is for them to go and fuck around and have some fun. And then after a couple weeks of that, they'll be like, all right, this is stupid. I need to get back to regular training.
Yeah. When, if ever, is it a good idea for client or athlete to do something off program? Yeah, during active rest. I would say with a caveat to James's statement of don't do too much. There's too much during
fuckery,
rest,
right?
Yeah,
like
don't just smash yourself, but do a little bullshit here and there. Generally speaking, doing things off program is by definition doing things you are not structurally prepared to do and necessarily carries a higher injury risk.
Yeah, that's true.
That's it. So if you want to do high rep, like drop set type shit, that you can do at the end of a program in the last week before deloading. That's the greatest time to do that. As far as hitting small PRs on big compound lifts, randomly, maybe the worst idea. If I was trying to get someone hurt, that's how I would program their training.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, what is the cost benefit ratio? Like, do we really think that giving them the opportunity to do like a clean and jerk is going to completely reinvigorate their motivation to train?
Right.
Probably
Yeah.
not.
Nah.
Right. The issue is more that they probably are having staleness, overreaching, stuff like that, where they just need a break from the rigidity of the program and they need some autonomy back in their life. That's probably the issue. It's not that they need to do something off program. It's just they just need to get off program for a little bit to regain some semblance of control in their life.
All right. Then he says, per your advice, I'll be swapping around the longer 15-week mass with the 11-week mass. Very cool. During and doing my mini cut. I'm unclear as if your advice is to add a mini cut or swap out my strength block for a mini cut. Swap out strength block for mini cut is best advice there. I also chose an 11-week mass at the start because it ends right around when the holidays start. Okay. Then after the holidays are over, do a mini cut and then do a 10-week mass. Okay, don't just do a 15-week max, because after the holidays, you'll be a fat fuck. And then you're going to do a 15-week mass after that. Fuck that.
Fuck yeah. Job
so either mass through the holidays or maintain through the holidays and do a mini cut after. Either way, do a mini cut after. The past 2 years, I found that I actually have a hard time eating enough to maintain my rate of progress while massing. I'm usually able to hold my body weight, but often I go down some, less than becoming a fat piece of crap. Now that I'm going to train through the holidays. Oh, he is going to train through the holidays. Would you advise a different split between masses and length? No, it's the same splits are fine. But eat. For the love of God, eat. It's the fucking holidays. The easiest thing in the world.
Fat piece of crap.
God damn it. Harrison, if you can't eat up during the holidays, good God. Challenge issue.
You're getting on Dr. Mike's nerves over here, Harrison. What are you doing? Not eating on the holidays. You're doing 1RMs.
Like
what is wrong with you?
Harrison, get in my office. Ugh. The only thing I think about high school principals at this point is, because my wife and I watch a whole lot of Special Victims Unit, SVU, Law and Order, is like they're 100% rate of child molestation, like bar none. So anytime I do a principal impression, I'm like, ugh, I feel eerie about it. I'm like, oh, good God.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of a worse job for me than high school principal.
Oh, no.
Yelling at kids all day. Are you fucking kidding me? The least authoritarian person ever. I can't herd cats. I guess nobody can. I can't herd sheep. I'm terrible at telling people what to do. I don't give a shit. I'm fucking libertarian to the max. And also, like, dealing with high schoolers, I would straight up just run. Run.
It's the worst of both worlds, because you have like a huge level of bureaucracy that you have to deal with all the time. God. And you just have to deal with all these fucking problems when kids are acting up. Like, the worst.
Anyway, thank God someone does that job. Continuing on the topic of having taking a break from training due to at-home stress, one thing that Chad Wesley Smith and I have emailed about has been my mindset about training. The break offered a lot of time for introspection about my life in general. One of the things I realized is that before the break, I was obsessed with numbers and weights and wanted to hit in competition. Instead of being process-oriented, I was goal and ego-oriented. In your experience with coaching, even your pursuit of personal fitness goals, can you define what is a healthy mindset toward progress and goal setting, and what signs you look at for an athlete where you would be a bit worried that it's not a healthy mindset? Thanks as always, Harrison.
You know, we did touch on this one like a couple webinars ago. I don't want to like be dismissive. We did touch on this
super quick
okay
rehashing. I'll try and then you can clean up as usual. So I think one of the big things the number one is a couple ingredients of healthy relation to sport. One is, do you typically enjoy more than hate the day-to-day? If the answer is no, then you have a problem. It doesn't even matter what your goal setting is. If you don't like the day-to-day fundamentally, like someone asked me, like, do you like to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Yes, then everything else is icing on the cake, right? If you like the practice, you're good to go. If you don't like practice, no number of goals in the world can save you from fucking hating the goddamn sport. Secondly, as far as setting your goals, you can have a very serious mindset of like, I have to hit these, as long as it doesn't lead you to lose sleep. Or you can have a pretty relaxed mindset of like, these would be really great things to hit. As long as you're training hard and objectively and loving training day to day, on average, you're good to go. So those are my thoughts on goal setting and happiness. Is goals don't really determine a ton of what you've been happy about or not. It's really the day to day. If you fucking love training, you don't even need goals. Now, not having goals can lead you astray into not focusing your efforts like you should be. So you should have some goals. You can approach them from anything from a relaxed idea that they're there, all the way to like an obsession. But like if you're obsessed with your goals and you love training, you're living in paradise. If you love training and you're not obsessed with your goals, you're living in paradise. If you are obsessed about your goals and you hate training, you're living in hell. If you're not obsessed about your goals, you don't care about them, and you hate training, you're going to quit like tomorrow. So loving the day-to-day more than you hate it, right? Which doesn't mean loving it all the time, is absolutely the huge piece in the puzzle that I have to contribute to this conversation, James.
Yeah, and sometimes I think more recently there's been a lot of focus on a lot of focus and glorification of like the process, which of course is well warranted. But having a good goal gives you the opportunity to structure the things that you love to do in a productive way. So I still think it's important to have some end game that you're working towards, at least, because it at least outlines the framework for why you are doing what you're doing at all, and gives you a chance to seek different milestones along the way.
Yeah. It organizes your training because it tells you, fundamentally lays out what to do. And I super think it's really important to have realistic goals.
Yeah.
The worst thing in the world is when people have unrealistic goals. They just literally set themselves up for disappointment. I can't believe I didn't total 1,000 kilos. Like, what was your best total? 800. What the fuck is wrong with you? Whatever happened to 850? Like, well, I don't know. I don't want to undershoot. Shut the fuck up. Undershoot, do a real great job, overshoot your goals, total 875 at your meet instead of 800. And then the next meet you could say, I want to total 910 or something. And eventually you get where you're going anyway.
Yeah. So, I mean, like your goal is kind of like the most superficial layer of specificity in your program. It's like, why am I doing any of this? What constraints do I have? Well, I have some limited constraints that I'm at least considering, which is driving the rest of my training. And I think that's really important. Now, I think there's also something to be said that we're talking about for training for recreational purposes. If you're training for professional purposes, at some point, this becomes your job. And it doesn't really matter whether or not you love it anymore. If you do love it, great. If you don't love it, you be disciplined and you keep fucking doing it anyway because you have lofty goals to achieve, because your life is dependent on it in some way, shape, or form, right? So I think that from a recreational perspective, this is great. I think you do have to shift your mindset a little bit when you're doing it from a professional perspective, because it doesn't matter if you're motivated or if you're loving it anymore. You got to show up and go to work at that point.
Boom. Oh, all right. Harrison, great questions as always. All right. Silver Garza says, just wanted to say thank you for the answer last week. Somehow I missed it on the podcast, but just got to hear it. Super helpful. Awesome. We were super happy that you liked it. All right. Areen Salam says, hey, doctors, how big can some muscles like abs and forearms grow? Like, is there a max potential based on their size? Yeah, for all muscles, actually. And if you want to clue on what your max potential is, on an average estimate, I would Google Menno Henselman's muscle growth calculator, and Menno has a thing where you can type in a bunch of shit, and it tells you how big you're going to get. So enjoy. Number 2, can you generally critique my next Mesocycles program? The goal is to get as much size as I can on my delts and chest and lats. The secondary goal is arms and upper traps. I'm just maintaining and growing the rest only a little bit. So
the top half of your body.
Top half, got it. It's the V-Taper program. I guess he missed the secondary goal is arms and upper traps, right? So more V-Taper. I'm considering maybe even starting on lower on chest. All right. So I think these three, these are
sets.
Sets, yeah. 3 sets of barbell rows, 3 sets of pull-ups, 2 lat pullovers, 4 reverse cable fly, 3 bicep curls, 3 hammer curls, bench press, incline, skull crushers, tricep pushdowns, lateral raises, cable laterals, Smith squats, leg extensions, leg curls, seated shrugs, upright rows, neck. This will be 2 times a week. I haven't included rep ranges yet. Oh, okay, thank God. Okay, I thought he was just doing this once.
Wait, this is 2 times per week?
So I think it's day 1, day 2, day 3, and then day 4 will be back again that way.
So, right off the bat, if I could just throw out a critique is you're already kind of on the bro split kind of routine here. I think you could definitely benefit from splitting up the frequency a little bit rather than just doing like chest, back. Like I'm guessing if you're doing this as like a mass phase, like how many days per week, Irene, do you think you can do arms every day? Very feasible. Same thing with like some other movements, like some of your back movements easily could do lats like 4 times a week.
Yeah. So James, let's quickly like consider this. So I think, Irene, you can do chest and back 4 times a week, okay, and legs twice a week. And then you can do shoulders, some kind of side or rear lateral on every single one of those days,
Every day.
including legs. The legs volume you should keep lower because you said you wanted to have maintenance for your legs. So I would just take leg extensions out completely.
Get those seated calves out of here too.
Yeah, seated calves out. Just do Smith squats and hip hinges of some kind. Forget about leg curls. And then so for example, Monday you would do lots of rowing, a little bit of incline pushing. Tuesday you would be tons of sort of decline and flat pushing and a little bit of vertical pulling work. Then you do legs. Then you do a Thursday a ton of vertical pulling work and a little bit of decline pushing. And then you do a shitload of incline pushing the next day, coupled with a little bit of rowing work. And then every one of those days you do some arms and you do some shoulders. And then the arms you only do 4 days a week, and the shoulders you do 6 days a week. That would be a program that would look pretty cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm not a huge fan of the the same workouts twice per week, but it's at the same time that's just me being nitpicky. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, I would just replace some of the movements and rep ranges and stuff like that.
Yeah, but otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, and then he says this will be twice a week. I haven't included rep ranges yet. Plus, how would I include some ab work spaced out? Oh, whenever your abs are recovered, you train them again. You can ab. I mean, it depends on how much do you prioritize abs? No. If you're not prioritizing abs, then you just train them twice a week on leg day or something.
And it depends too. Like I've gotten really creative with some of my clients in their ab work. Like you can do almost every day if you separate out the like kind of the trunk flexion or the hip flexion or like some of the other movements. Like you can get creative with that. And abs is another one that's pretty resilient to high frequencies. So you could do abs almost every day.
He does say that his legs will be at a lower volume. Sets won't increase. So that's good. That's
okay.
Good. Cool. Yeah, looks good.
Yeah.
All right. George Peters says, hi, doctors Mike and James. My ex-coach labeled me a hard gainer as I only put on 11 pounds in scale weight in 2 years of bulking. He also suggested that maybe I may be advanced and too old to put on muscle. I've been weight training for 4 years and I'm 47. I'm questioning the conclusions he's reached. 4 years of training doesn't make me advanced. You can see in the context of my weight.
That's the first problem.
Lack of muscle. I was a very lean 137 at the beginning of my cut and 148 at the end of bulk. I'm 5'6", but I know the good Dr. Mike is around the same height and he's jacked. So I know that shouldn't be a limiting factor. Well, you're not me. You don't have my genetics. You don't take the supplements I do. So you have actually no idea. There's people at my height that are 50 pounds heavier than me, but I will never be that big. So careful.
Yeah, and height's just not a thing. Height's not necessarily indicative of either.
Yeah, I could
look at NBA players. They're fucking like 7 feet tall.
Right. Also, although I'm no spring chicken at 47, I don't believe that's too old to put on muscle. I'm aware that I could be a hard gainer or unlucky genetically, but I don't think labeling me as a hard gainer is a helpful conclusion to draw without exploring other explanations. That's definitely true. I know that I contributed to the unsuccessful bulk as I was initially reluctant to increase calories. Okay, so that doesn't count. I just finished a 35-week cut, lost 28 pounds, and was very lean. Thought my life had been more focused on losing weight than actively trying to gain weight. As a consequence, I was cautious about weight gain. It was important for me to know our approach was working and that there was some muscle gain. I also changed to a stressful job that affected my sleep and unfortunately picked up a couple of injuries. That 211 impacted my ability to gain muscle. The only noticeable change in my physique was that my waist measurements increased. I do accept and understand there'll be an element of fat gain with muscle gain. My coach's answer was to eat more and gain weight faster. It's unlikely to be correct. However, I was reluctant to do this without any indication that the training was working and some muscle was being built in my upper body, which was my main objective. I did get stronger in my lower body, but not in my upper body. Okay, that's not a good sign. So I have 3 questions and look forward to hearing your thoughts. Number 1, I felt I was patient and stuck with the training plan, and I'm aware that sometimes you have to trust the process. I'm wondering at what point it's time to not trust the process prescribed and try something different. Well, if someone coaches you for a year and you don't get stronger in the upper body, try to fix the obvious things that you're doing wrong. Increase your sleep, make your stress better, gain the weight he tells you to gain. And if you still make very few gains at all in the upper body, I would get a different coach.
Yeah, it sounds like you weren't completely compliant on the diet side of things, which in terms of gaining muscle is, I mean, you shot yourself in the foot on that one. But I agree with Dr. Mike. If give it a year or so, it sounds like, I don't know, not gaining strength in the upper body seems a bit odd. It sounds like you just trained your legs less and they were maybe just in a higher state of preparedness and they were just really fresh all the time. So maybe that's why you got strong.
Too much. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
There's a ton we don't know here about your training. He
Let me
says,
just real quick, sorry. What I have found a lot of the times too is this idea of hard gainers is just an easy out. It's a scapegoat for either the individual or the coach in this case, where it's an easy way to pass the buck and just say like, oh, well, you're not getting the results you want because you're a hard gainer. Maybe you're a low responder, or maybe both of you need to take the responsibility and say like, what are some things that maybe I'm not doing so good on? So you were already candid about it. You said my lifestyle was stressful. I maybe wasn't doing as good a job on the diet, and maybe on the training side of things, maybe your training's just not that good, right? If he's got you on a bro split as a beginner, that might just be a complete waste of time for you, right? You as a relative beginner, maybe early intermediate at this point at 4 years in, you should be doing a lot of the compound lifts, not using a ton of excess exercise variations, and focusing on getting stronger in most of the main lifts. If he's got you doing a bunch of like single leg SLDLs and a bunch of stupid cable curls and stuff like that all the time, then I would be very suspicious of the training program. But like if he's been having you do bench presses, deadlifts, squats, rows, all of those things, and putting a good effort on those areas of your training, then I would say, okay, yeah, that is evidence that maybe you're a bit on the lower responder side of things. But I think this idea of being a hard gainer is often just used to pass the buck and just be like, I'm deferring responsibility either as the coach or as the athlete. So that's my skeptical James curmudgeon-y take on that.
It's right on. He goes, number 2, how do you assess success? In this case, ensuring that there is some muscle gain in the weight gain. Repetition strength across a wide variety of exercises that tax the muscle groups that you're talking about. You put on muscle when every single pushing exercise you do is like fucking 5 reps or 20 pounds ahead of where it was. You're more jacked.
And the mirror doesn't hurt either, right? Like if you gain muscle,
your training partners and stuff should be like, whoa, holy shit, dude. And you should be like, whoa, holy shit, dude. So if none of that's happening, then it's by no means clear you're getting muscle.
Yeah.
So. Number 3, at what point would you feel you've exhausted all the tools you have an attached label hard gainer? Well, not to belabor a point, James already beats death quite well. There's no reason to ever attach the label hard gainer. There's no reason to attach any labels. You always do your best. And if your best isn't working, you try to reassess, reintegrate, and then do your best again. That's all you ever have. I'm a hard gainer because I'm 36 years old, and I'm, in order for me to gain muscle, I just have to train just as well as I ever did, and eat it at a surplus and take plenty of special sports supplements. And I used to be able to gain muscle taking 0 sports supplements and just eating high wanted back when I was, 15. Now I'm a hard gainer, right? But you would look at me and say, oh, he's a hard gainer. Well, I am. Almost every IFB pro and everyone at the high level is a hard gainer, even more than me. So that you wouldn't like attach that special, you'd be like, oh yeah, Phil Heath is a hard gainer. He is now. So what's the point of that? There's no point. You just got to do your best. That's it.
And so like, what's the end game too, right? Where it's like, okay, I've identified that I'm a low responder. Let's use that term. I like that one a little bit better. What next? Do you just give up? Do you just say like, well, fuck this. I'm not doing this anymore.
You can always
right?
give
Like,
up if you want.
Yeah. So what's the other option too? It's like all you can do is, like, as Mike said, is do your best. And part of doing your best is always just refining your training, nutrition, and lifestyle practices to orient towards your goals. And that's just the best that you can do.
Yeah. We've got a video coming out at some point on RP. It's already been recorded. It's going to be on RP Plus quite soon, actually. It's in the Hypertrophy Concepts and Tools videos that are coming out. And it's literally an entire video on troubleshooting lack of gains. And it's got like, I think 9-step process to troubleshoot your lack of gains. So look for that. And once you've done all those things, and that takes like a few years to get through all of them, if you really are getting shitty gains at the end of that, then I think it's just probably time to be like, these are the gains I'm going to be getting, and this is the rate of progress I'm going to be seeing. And if you think it's a waste of time for you to continue to train hard in hypertrophy for these sorts of gains, then you can do anything else you want with your life. Yeah,
totally.
All right. Deano P says, hi, Mike and James. First, I want to say thank you for putting all this brilliant, amazing content. All this amazing content. The lectures, articles, technique videos, etc. are just brilliant. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Glad you enjoyed.
Could you please explain the difference in regards to which muscles are primarily targeted elbows out rows versus example, middle, high, low bent rows? Thank you in advance. So generally speaking, elbows out rows that go to the middle of your body or high to your body generally tax the rear delts a little bit more, they tax the rhomboids a little bit more, maybe the teres major a little bit more, and the middle traps a little bit more. And then as the elbows come down and low, and as you pull lower, it targets the lats a little bit more and those muscles a little bit less. So
Yeah.
I don't even like to think of the back as composed of individual muscles. I just think of areas, like sort of like lats-ish area, lower middle area, and upper middle area. And I just pull from a variety of angles and fuck all that shit up. So
Yeah. And so you could think of it like, if you guys are familiar with kind of like the reverse fly or like the reverse pec deck, I mean, the high elbow row is virtually all of those same muscles just done in a compound way. You're just breaking at the elbow. It's the same shoulder movement for the most part. Now we're just adding that compound elbow.
Yep. Thank you in advance. All right. Ismar. Last time I had it.
What?
Anyway. Dr. Mike, Dr. James, thank you for all your answers to the last webinar. Just a quick appreciation for all the other great questions by the RP Plus community. There are so many nuances with your detailed answers to learn and solidify. Well, thank you so much. You're smart.
Thanks, my man.
Yes, I am from Bosnia-Herzegovina. And yes, I'm 6'2". I knew all motherfuckers are tall.
Mm-hmm.
My question is maybe outside of your lane, but perhaps you had experience with this. Since I played a lot of guitar, my left wrist was in a flex position for longer periods of time with fingers moving. When I rack the bench with slightly higher weights, I feel a stinging in my left wrist. It's something that I avoid by getting a lift from a buddy, and it doesn't hurt that bad. Could form training reduce the pain?
I actually played the guitar for a very long time, but I don't think that that's related. I think you just have to play with your grip width and find a comfortable position on the bench. So you might just be using a fixed position. This is just the bench press position that you've always done, and it's always been fine, and you're having some pain. I think at some point you just have to play around with it and say, like, okay, if I go out or in a little bit, is it any better? If I use like a football bar, like the ones with the different grips, is that any better? Like, I don't think that any specific forearm training, unless you have the world's most lopsided forearm, is going to do you any good. So if you're all here on the flexors and none of the extensors, maybe, and that's still like a big maybe. I don't think that's the issue. With the guitar, you're using a lot of the flexors, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're having like reciprocal inhibition problems on the extensor side. So I would say it's probably more of a grip thing than it is a forearm training thing.
Yeah. All right. Oh, I lost my place. Okay. Daniel Blank.
Blanc.
Hi, Docs. You said it's fine to
go straight to question one.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is great. Any advice on how to feel hip hinge movement more in hams than glutes? On RDLs, I'm 2 inches away from touching the ground using 20-pound plates. Strict form, great tension throughout the hams. ROM is limited by the hams, but they never get sore. Occasionally, minor stiffness the next morning, but glutes do. Man, if you were a girl, you'd be the happiest girl in the world. Soreness is not prerequisite for growth, but I can't help think by missing something. Yeah, no, you're totally right. If something is getting sore and something else is not, that something is probably getting stimulated more. So I think that making your knee bend a little bit less, almost straight knees, is probably going to go well on your way. And also sometimes some exercises, people fucking. Oh, here's another one. Try to put your feet onto little 2.5-pound plates, your toes, so your heels stay on the ground. It's almost the opposite of an Olympic weightlifting shoe. That can really put some tension in your hams and keep your knees very, very close to straight. So it really fucks your hams up. That probably help. But if it doesn't, some people just need more isolation because some exercises just tax some muscles a lot for some people and more than others. That's just the way it goes.
I found that there's 3 major points on the technique here, especially when people are not feeling it in their hamstrings. So Mike already hit the first one, which is keep your knee a little straighter and make sure that you are not squatting down. So a lot of people will start with a straight knee or pretty close, and then they'll kind of ease themselves down, and their knee angle will go like this.
Because you can lift more weight like that.
Yeah, and it just displaces the tension more onto the glutes that way. So it feels better for you because it's just generally a stronger. So keep your knee angle higher, or more straight, and keep it fixed the whole time. Point 2, a lot of the times people aren't doing the anterior pelvic tilt, and that makes a huge difference in putting the tension on your hamstrings.
Yeah, sure.
So anterior pelvic tilt, all the way down, all the way up. And then the other one is keeping the barbell close to your body. So what I usually tell people is to just let it kind of graze up and down your legs. Now, don't scrape it up like a deadlift where you're going to be bleeding, but I find that it's natural for people to let it drift out in front of them,
and then there were backgrounding starts and all this other stuff.
Exactly. So keep the barbell basically grazing up and down your legs throughout the entirety. And what that's going to do is you're going to feel that in your lats when you're not used to that technique. So you're going to do stiff-legged deadlifts, and the next day you're going to be like, why the fuck are my lats so sore? It's because you were actively keeping it in position that way, but that will work itself out over time.
All right. Number 2, is it a common experience? If it is, what's the mechanism for it that DOMS comes abruptly? Trained a muscle group Monday morning, woke up Tuesday morning feeling fine. A few hours later, DOMS. No clue, but sometimes I think DOMS is nutritionally mediated. If you don't eat a lot after training, DOMS doesn't happen because your body doesn't think it's going to recover itself, so it doesn't even bother. But when you eat, your body's like, haha, we have resources, fucking flood the immune system into the muscle. So I think a lot of times if you train and then don't eat for a while, you don't get sore, you just kind of get diffusely tired. And then if you have a big ass meal, go to sleep, you'll wake up the next day like, oh my fuck, I'm super sore. It's actually fundamentally a good thing. If you never ever get sore from any amount of training, you're almost certainly a very low responder. But in your particular case, I'm not sure what the mechanism was.
Yeah, same here. Not sure.
Number 3, when cutting, how much sense is in correcting for lost weight in exercises for which load includes body weight? Push-ups, dips, squats, etc. Over 4 weeks period, a 200-pound person can lose 8 pounds with weight on the bar, progression planned between 5 to 10 pounds, which possibly can decrease load throughout the meso. My guess would be it's taken care of by rep progression, RIR. Your guess is exactly correct. If you're not losing muscle, you're just going to gain reps. You're going to be like, holy fuck, like I'm just gaining reps. Pull-ups get way easier. Sometimes your technique gets better on pull-ups as you get lighter. That all works. So I would just let those factors take care. If you really want to keep your reps very, very tight, then you can add more weight more aggressively. But I wouldn't. Some people do crazy shit like auto-regulating their pull-up weight, like whatever they weigh that day, they add on a belt in addition. Like you can. It's just a little nuts. So.
Yeah, I think that's largely a waste of time, especially for some of those more like the more compound movements like the squat. Like, don't even bother. Yeah. It could be worth your time on the dips and pull-ups. I don't personally think it is, but hey.
I mean, the real answer is like, look, on a cut, if dipping gets way easier, faster than you thought, next time you cut, just add weight more aggressively on dips. Instead of adding 2.5 pounds to the dip belt every week, add 5, and all of a sudden you've gained 20 pounds on your dips and lost no reps, and you're like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
Same applies to dips when you're mass gaining. Sometimes when you're massing, you take a much less aggressive increase in weight in dips and pull-ups. And sometimes in things like pull-ups, you don't actually increase weight at all. You just try to keep the reps stable while gaining weight. And if you succeed, you're like, holy fuck, I just gained a ton of muscle on my back.
Yeah, totally agreed.
Number 4, exercise selection is about individual stimulus to fatigue ratios, and if something works for someone, that's what matters. That being said, is there an argument for heavy isolation exercises to be done with free weights over machines? For example, bicep curl with a barbell versus cable. Thank you.
That's the same argument, essentially.
Yeah,
it's still an SFR issue. So those are all things where you might. It's just again, it's an individualization thing where you might find that like. Doing 5 to 10 reps with the cable curl for some reason feels better than doing it with the barbell. I don't know. It doesn't mean that one's necessarily better than the other.
Yeah. All right.
I shouldn't have used that rep range, actually. I regret doing that. Don't do curls for 5 to 10 very often.
Yeah.
Probably not a good way to keep arms on.
All right. Here we go. YouTube time.
YouTube.
How would you train Eddie Hall for boxing?
Neither of us are boxers.
Yeah, I would get him in touch with a very good striking coach and manage his volumes and intensities appropriately and ease in. Huge deal. Okay. Pico Rodriguez says, is variation necessary for a bodybuilder or someone who wants to look good? I have a home gym, so I can only do 1 exercise per muscle. Will it matter if I do enough volume with it? Not in the short term, it won't. In about a course of 4 to 8 weeks, you can get close to optimal muscle gain with just 1 exercise. The thing is, the next 4 to 8 weeks, you could have had similar gains if you had traded out in another exercise. 4 to 8 weeks after that, you could have better gains if you used another exercise. 4 to 8 weeks after that, you might start to have joint and connective tissue pain and start to have to do more often reductions in volume and intensity, which is an opportunity cost. So variation is not necessary in the short term, but it is necessary to get optimal results in the long term. And that's something that I see coming up in questions a lot is people have something they want to do, and they say, do I have to do something more complex that costs more money or costs more effort or so on and so forth? You don't have to do a fucking thing. If you want the best possible results, you'll do what it takes. And it takes everything to get the optimal results. But decent results, then you can get great results doing only pull-ups for your back. If you do only pull-ups and you're intelligent about your programming, you can have a ball of fucking looking back. Is it going to be your best back? No, of course not. Not even close. But it's going to look good. You can get a nice big chest doing only push-ups of different kinds. But if you have trouble gaining in your chest and it's not working, you're going to have to expand your shit.
And also, even though you have a home gym limitation, I doubt that you only can do one exercise per muscle group. You might just be constraining your use of variation at that point, right? Like if you can only do push-ups, well, you can do narrow push-ups, regular push-ups, elbows out wide push-ups. You could do feet elevated push-ups. You can do deficit push-ups. Like you might not be thinking outside the box here. If you're doing legs, like you might be like, okay, well, I can only do, this one squat thing. Well, you can do lunges. You could do like stiff-legged deadlifts or good mornings, or you know what I mean. There's plenty of options. You just might have to think outside the box a little bit. And if you are using an at-home gym, Dr. Mike and Dr. Wife actually published an article on the RP website for some suggestions there. So check that out.
Boom. James, right for you. Thoughts on using ice baths to recover from non-training stimulus like manual labor, or even if just non-hypertrophy stimulus cardio?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. Just know that if you are somebody who is hypertrophy training every day or very, as much as you can, there's going to be a little cost benefit analysis. So if you're like really fucked up from work and you're like, dude, I need to get in that ice bath or I'm not going to be able to get on the job site tomorrow. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. And you're just making a trade-off at that point where you say like my fitness goals take a backseat to my professional goals. And that's totally fine. I think it would just be naive to think that it still was not, some of the same principles were not applying in terms of the trade-off between recovery and adaptation. So that's still at play. Just how much of that you want to deal with is a balance of your fitness and professional goals at that point. Yeah. It would make sense to me, honestly, because your professional goals is what put money on the table and gives you the opportunity to have fitness goals. So it would seem logical if it helps you a lot to do it.
Boom. I'm torn on which question to answer. We'll just answer 4 this time because this one's easy. Okay. Darren Hawkins says, Jason Blaha said reverse pyramid training is marketing hype and garbage marketed towards the lazy. Has no place for bodybuilding or building strength. Do you agree? No, absolutely not. Reverse pyramid training is great. In other words, just starting heavy and then going incrementally lighter. That's just intelligent training.
Yeah, and I don't know why we call it. I understand why they call it reverse pyramid, but that's really not even what it is. It's not. It's literally just trying to get the best stimulus that you can when you're the most fresh and working your way down into things that are more resilient to fatigue as you go. That's really what the issue is.
100%. All right, Moonlight Shadow X. It's a hell of a name. For someone who started their fitness journey fat, then spent the first 5 years of training in a deficit cutting for the majority of that time, have I fucked myself in terms of not being able to achieve the most muscle I genetically could have, i.e. wasted newbie gains, compared to if I had spent most of that time in a surplus? And what should I do now? Currently 15 to 20% body fat. Feel as if I'm extremely undeveloped for someone with 5 years of training. Furthermore, if I start doing everything optimally now, how would I be able to gain muscle? Would I be able to gain muscle at a faster rate than me in an alternate universe where I spent those 5 years on a surplus, i.e. does rate of maximum possible muscle gain decrease as a function of training age, time spent training, or function of current muscle size as a percentage of your genetic limit? It's a great question. So I would start the answer with the following. As long as you are young enough and healthy enough to train hard, which means you are aged 15 to 40, the vast majority of your gains is just a matter of opening up your genetic limit by training hard for long enough. For example, if you train at a deficit for the first 5 years and gain very little muscle, but you're genetically really, really adept, as soon as you open up the floodgates of food, you're going to get fucking jacked fast. Like years 5 through 8, you're going to put on like 40 fucking pounds. If you never had it coming genetically, you're going to gain no muscle during the first 5 years. And then when you start to do a surplus, your body's going to be like, and it's not because of what you did early. Now, in an ideal sense, you're younger and have less injuries and a little bit less anabolic resistance when you are, if you start bulking from the time you start to try to get big, that's more optimal. But to be honest, it doesn't amount to much. So no, being that you spent your first 5 years of training in deficit, it means you can't get as big as you would have been able to get, but you can get pretty damn close, assuming you were still between the ages of 20 and 40. You don't have any major debilitating injuries. You're going to get what you're going to get.
And like, I think you're also under the false impression that you somehow missed your beginner gains just because you were in a deficit. You probably recomped at least to some degree during that time. And that's the beginner gains you get. And that's a huge benefit. Like you get to lose fat and gain muscle at the same time. Yeah. That's as good as beginner gains as anyone can ask for. Would it be marginally better if you were massing? Yeah, probably a little bit, but who knows? It might be one of those things too, where again, it might manifest itself later on. Like Mike said, like, once you start massing later on, 5 years down the road, all of a sudden you're fucking huge. And it seems just your response is disproportionate. Well, maybe it had something to do with the beginner gains that you were reaping earlier on, which now are able to manifest under better energy conditions.
Yeah. And better energy conditions is really the word of the day, because you missed your beginner gains from training, so to speak, but you've missed nothing on beginner nutritional gains. Your first time massing, oh my God, your body's like, what the fuck is all this? So a lot of the gains really are a matter of filling in your genetic potential, and how you go about that is not super, super pertinent. It does make a difference, but a very small difference. So I wouldn't sweat it.
And it's too late, right? So also it's like, what's the actionable item? It's like, well, just
tell others not to repeat your mistake, but also tell them it's not a very big mistake.
Yeah. All right, folks, that was an excellent Q&A. We did it a day early this week to accommodate my goofy-ass schedule. I'm going to work with Dr. Mike, and we'll figure out what we're going to do. My internet situation, again, if you missed the beginning, is going to be a little bit wonky for the next couple weeks, so I'm going to see what I can do. I'm working on it. I'm getting a cell phone range extender, and we're going to have some limited internet at the house, and then hopefully in July we'll have fiber optic, and we'll be back to complete normal. So thanks for tuning in, and appreciate you guys being patient with me and my bullshit for the next couple weeks. Dr. Mike, you got anything before we sign off?
I got nothing, folks. More videos to come pretty much 4 or 5 days of the week. We got new YouTube videos coming up, so we're rocking it.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for engaging with us. Keep subscribing to the RP YouTube channel, and keep sending in those questions. We will talk to you next time.
Peace.